Welcome to your Optimal Personal Economy podcast with Justin Bennett. Your personal economy is your ability to create, protect, preserve, and utilize your wealth, your financial world. Justin will share strategies and stories to help you optimize your personal economy. Now, on to the show with Justin Bennett and co-host Matt Halloran.
Hello and welcome to episode number 24 with Justin Bennett. Today we're going to talk about a risk that very few people ever consider. And the title of the podcast actually is, Have You Considered This Retirement Risk? And so, Justin, what is this risk that you're referring to?
Hey, Matt, I think what happens when people talk about retirement and the word risk, it immediately goes back to like equity market risk, stock market risk, and potentially losing value of the money that they've saved and worked so hard to build. And clearly that's a risk, and that's a risk that should be taken into consideration. And we do a fairly good job on that risk. There's a risk that we talk to our clients about that is very much overlooked and not considered in many cases, which we refer to as longevity risk. And when you put that in just layman's terms, that just means somebody living longer than their assets may live. And so when you think about science and technology and medicine and how far advanced we are as a society in those domains, and ultimately what that then does to the length of time that somebody remains on this planet, then there's this careful consideration and strong realization that what may have been looked at as a 22-year period could very well end up being 41 years. And so there's this conversation that we talk about where it's like science and medicine and technology has kind of created this ability for people to live longer, and that's directly related and correlated to retirement. So longevity risk is a major, major risk because there's two things that are not present in retirement that are present when you're building wealth that could help with mistakes, right? So the two things that we would say are time and new money. Meaning when you're retired and you're converting money into income to be able to live your life, whatever money's not being spent for that period of time, like that year that you're living, like it needs to be doing something on your balance sheet. And so if you lose value, if that money loses value and goes down, it's not like you can say, hey, you know what, I'm just going to wait the next 18 months and allow that money to come back up in value before which I touch it. Because the reality is that money is your income, right? So you don't have time on your side. Like you can't wait and allow for the value to come back. And you also don't have, in most cases, new money being added to your balance sheet, like when you were working and you woke up the next morning and you went to work and you produced income and you were able to then put that onto your balance sheet. So you don't have time, you don't have new money like you did when you were creating wealth. So what happens is there's this very, very clear risk that is so often overlooked around people just living longer than they otherwise expected. And so this risk sometimes, in most cases, puts the greatest amount of pressure on retirement, but yet is just so often overlooked. Because, when you think about it, Matt, it's, people try to determine in their own mind when they're going to pass away. And they typically do that based off of when a mother, a father, an aunt, or an uncle, or a grandparent passed away, which, although may have some validity, I think the reality is that, science, technology, and medicine today is clearly a lot more advanced than what it was 10, 20, 30 years ago. So it's a little bit of an unfair analysis to compare when somebody might pass away who's living today versus, somebody who passed away in previous generations. So, therefore it's so critical that when you do plan for retirement and you do shift into that next phase, of course, whatever you do in the wealth creation phase sets up the life that you're going to live in the retirement phase. So it's critical to clearly navigate those decisions and understand how that works. It's also important to then realize that when you do go into that next phase of life, call it retirement, that there's this very, very critical risk, as we're calling it longevity risk, that needs to be understood, it needs to be discussed, and it needs to be, appreciated so that the planning and the money decisions can take that into consideration, and therefore you could always live the life that you want to be able to live with respect to income and lifestyle. So that longevity risk is a major, major risk, Matt, that is often discounted or just not even discussed. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and it seems like one of those risks, Justin, that many people are like, well, that's a good problem to have, but it really does pose longer, potentially could pose longer issues. I want to ask you one other quick thing, because you had said something about, when you were referring to the money aspect of it. When it comes to longevity risk, have you seen, or just longevity in general, have you seen inheritance, like a later inheritance, play a big part in making massive adjustments when it comes to longevity?
So maybe you could, I think I understand what you're asking, but I just want to make sure I'm clear. Can you come again?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll ask it in a different way. As people age, other people in their lives pass away, and it could be an unintended or unexpected inheritance that they could be getting much, much later in life, and that could end up changing their entire financial situation. Have you seen that happen? And if so, because of the longevity factor, how do those unexpected money opportunities come into play?
So my response to you, Matt, would be simply, if planning is done properly, somebody would not have to sacrifice their retirement income and the longevity risk that may be present inside of that retirement income planning to then leave behind a legacy. So if planning is done properly, there's the ability to maximize retirement income, eliminate longevity risk, and simultaneously leave behind a legacy. And so I think that it's normal for the people walking the streets of the United States to feel like there needs to be a compromise between retirement income and legacy. And for us at Bennett Financial, that's the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, we're able to demonstrate very, very clearly that we want people to maximize the amount of income that they want to be able to live in a comfortable lifestyle setting while never being concerned about outliving their money and still being able to leave behind a legacy or some dollars and cents to somebody that they authentically care about.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad that you say that there is a way to live without compromise there. A lot of people, especially baby boomers, want to have the opportunity to cover all three of those bases. And I don't know how many other financial services professionals are able to outline that. Maybe, Justin, that's another podcast for us. Maybe we should put a pin in that and jump on that a little later down the road and have you maybe nerd out a little bit on diving into that a little bit more deeply. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that might be a good idea because there's a lot there on that topic, and we could certainly expand on it. And I think just in my interactions with clients and new prospective clients, it just seems like it's a topic that really hits a chord for people. So why don't we pick up on that at a future episode and spend some time on that?
That sounds fantastic. Thank you very much for talking to our audience today about one risk that very few people consider in retirement, which is that idea of longevity risk. Any closing words of wisdom?
I think the idea is, to me, to make sure that, if you work with a professional as opposed to trying to do it on your own, spend time on this longevity risk element and what that means to income and what that means to legacy and how you could completely eliminate the longevity risk component because it can be done on an absolute certain basis to the extent that you work with a professional that's familiar with how to do that.
Wonderful. Well, Justin, thank you very much for your thought leadership today.
Thanks, Matt.
And for everybody at Bennett Financial, this is Matt Halloran. And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you take a moment and do that. That way, when Justin comes out with something, not only will it show up directly on your listening device, but it'll make it easier for you to share it with your friends and family. For everybody at Bennett Financial, we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.